Hey guys, today I bring you a chilling story. Let's meet Hawthorne Ashford, a man who, after 45 minutes of being literally dead, returned with an impactful message. He saw angels descending from the heavens with trumpets and received a shocking prophecy about November 12th. What he witnessed on the other side will leave you speechless. Before you start, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any stories like this. Get ready for an unforgettable experience. My name is Hawthorne Ashford, and if someone had asked me a few years ago what I thought about what happens after death, I would probably have given a blunt, skeptical answer. Nothing. What exists is the here and now. I have always been a pragmatic man, somewhat skeptical about spirituality, and I dealt with life believing that the present was all we had. I grew up and lived in Savannah, Georgia, a beautiful and historic city, but for me, it was just the place where I lived, with no great hidden meanings. I remember what brought me here, that moment when I decided to report what I experienced, an experience I never imagined possible. In 2003, my world was turned upside down when an ordinary dinner with a friend ended up leading me to an experience that changed my perception of life, love, and what it means to truly exist. That night was the beginning of everything. It's difficult to put into words what I felt, because the logic and reason that I always valued seemed to lose their meaning. Everything I had ever believed seemed to shatter in front of the magnitude of what I witnessed. As I tell this story, I know many may wonder, is it true? Did this really happen? Or is it just a delusion? I would ask this question myself if I were in their shoes. But the experience was so intense, so vivid, that it became impossible to ignore or dismiss it as a simple hallucination. So, I decided to share my experience in the hopes that maybe someone else will understand, or at least find comfort in what I learned. Deep down, I feel like my story is more than a personal testimony. It's a reminder that the life we lead on Earth is just a small part of something much bigger. There is a reality beyond what we can see and touch, a spiritual reality that transcends time and space. Our souls, I learned, are eternal, and life does not end with our last breath. I hope that by following along with me, you can see a little of what I saw and feel a little of what I felt, as if we were taking this journey together. This is a story of transformation, a narrative about the search for meaning, authenticity, and the power of universal love. This is my story, and I thank you for being here to hear it. The night of August 14th, 2003 seemed like any other. I was having dinner with a close friend, Peter, at a restaurant in downtown Savannah. The place was cozy, with soft lights and the smell of delicious dishes, but while we were there, talking about our usual routine, a series of seemingly insignificant choices lined up to change the course of my life. I was always curious about supplements and tried new things to maintain my health. Peter introduced me to a supplement he was trying, saying he felt more energized and clear-headed since taking it. Without thinking much, I accepted his offer to try it. It was a matter of minutes. First, I felt a strange tingling sensation in my hands and feet, followed by a slight dizziness. I thought it was a normal reaction and tried to ignore it, but the feeling quickly intensified. The room seemed to spin around me. The lights and voices seemed to become an indistinct, confusing mass. I stood up, finding my way to the bathroom, feeling my body react in ways I'd never experienced before. I heard Peter's worried voice in the background. "Are you okay, Hawthorne?" As soon as I got to the bathroom, everything went hazy. My legs gave way, and I felt a crushing weight on my chest, as if all the oxygen had been drained from my lungs. A deep panic set in, a primal instinct that something was terribly wrong. I tried to hold on to the sink to keep my balance, but my body just wouldn't respond. The freezing bathroom floor was the last thing I felt before everything went dark. At some point, I heard the bathroom door opening and alarmed voices around me. Although it all sounded distant, as if I were listening underwater, Peter had called employees, and soon someone called 911, seeking emergency help. However, it was already too late. My heart had stopped, and I was clinically dead. It was what many would call the end of the line, but for me, it was the beginning of a new journey. As my body remained inert, something inside me began to loosen. It was an almost ethereal sensation, as if I were made of gentle vapor floating away, observing what was happening from a new perspective. Somehow, I knew I was dying, but at the same time, I realized there was something beyond what I understood. It was the moment everything changed. The moment I let go of the limitations of my body and began an experience that I can't describe without sounding crazy. The instant I left my body, a strange yet peaceful feeling came over me. It was as if I were suspended in the air, watching everything from a point above. I could see my own body lying on the restaurant bathroom floor, surrounded by people who seemed to be talking in slow motion. The scene was surreal, as if I were watching a movie, but with the strange realization that I was part of it, in a very intimate and, at the same time, distant way. Everything seemed enveloped in a kind of welcoming silence. The voices around me sounded muffled, distant, while I remained in a state of complete clarity and serenity. I've never been religious, and I've always viewed the idea of a soul with skepticism. But there, at that moment, reality seemed greater than any scientific or logical explanation I'd ever known. I existed beyond my body, in a way I had never imagined possible. I looked at my face, pale and lifeless, and, strangely, I felt no fear or despair. Instead, a deep curiosity took hold of me. So this is what happens, I thought. Is this how it all ends? However, a small voice inside seemed to whisper that this was not the end. It was just the beginning of a much greater journey. As I watched what was happening, I noticed that my vision began to expand, as if the perspective of the bathroom and restaurant became just a small part of a much larger picture. It was as if I was being guided away from that place, my spirit floating in a kind of peaceful darkness that stretched out infinitely. Suddenly, I felt a presence next to me. It was intense but strangely familiar, like meeting someone I'd always known but could only now see. I turned around and saw a figure shrouded in soft light, with a serene countenance and deep gaze. He had a bearing that reminded him of someone from another time, wearing clothes that seemed ancient, but that blended with the light around him in an almost mystical way. "I am Drake Ashford," said the figure, its voice echoing harmoniously within me, "and I have come to guide you, Hawthorne." I didn't know how to react, what to say. Everything seemed beyond words. Drake didn't need an answer. He just extended his hand, and without hesitation, I accepted. As soon as I touched his hand, a current of peace and understanding ran through my entire being. I felt that I was safe, and that this figure somehow knew me deeply, like an old friend who had been by my side my entire life without me knowing. Drake led me into an experience that would completely change my perception of everything I knew up until that point, and I began to see what it truly means to exist. When I held your hand, Drake Ashford, a wave of recognition passed through my being. Even though I had never seen him before, I felt a deep connection to him. He was not a stranger. It felt like a part of me, as if it had always been there, waiting for this moment. His face exuded a calm that transcended any fear or doubt he might have had. There was something about him, an aura, a presence, that made me feel completely safe, like I was under the protection of someone who really cared. Drake had an intriguing appearance. He was wearing old clothes, perhaps from the 18th century, with a dark jacket and a collar that revealed a certain formality. His features were striking, with deep eyes that seemed to contain the weight and wisdom of centuries. He didn't need to explain to me who he was or why he was there. I just knew he was there to guide me on a spiritual journey that would change everything for me. "Hawthorne," he began, his voice soft and full of authority, "you are about to see what few are capable of understanding in a lifetime. I will guide you to understand the true nature of your existence and the purpose we carry within us." Drake's words penetrated my mind in a way I couldn't ignore. I felt like he knew more about me than I knew myself. A part of me still wanted to question what was happening, but another, stronger part told me to trust him and allow him to lead me. Drake reached out with his other hand and, without saying a word, began to guide me into a welcoming darkness. It was as if we were in some kind of ethereal space, where time and space, as I knew them, did not exist. In a moment, Drake stopped and looked at me with a serious expression. "There is something you need to see," he said, his voice dropping into a gravelly tone. "Something that will happen in the world of the living. Something that will change the spirituality of humanity." He then gestured, and a vision began to take shape before me. I saw the sky open, illuminated by a brilliant golden light. Angels descended from the heights, their faces serene but imposing. Each one held a trumpet, which, when played, seemed to emit an ancient melody, something that I felt in the depths of my soul. "What is that?" I asked, fascinated and confused at the same time. "This is the 12th of November," replied Drake. A day when the divine will touch the earth in a way it has never seen before. It is a milestone, Hawthorne, a spiritual calling that many will feel but few will understand. As I watched the vision, a sense of urgency settled over me. I knew this event would bring something important, a change that would affect everyone, like a spiritual wave spreading across the world. The presence of the angels, the trumpets, and the intensity of the light were clear signs that something was about to happen, something grand and divine. Drake continued, "You, Hawthorne, will be the bearer of this message. When you return, you must tell what you saw, help others prepare for what is to come." His words resonated with me with an unmistakable weight. I realized that this vision was not just an isolated event in my experience. It was a call for me to share what I saw and alert the world to the importance of connecting to the divine. The vision faded, but the feeling remained. Drake knew I needed to take it all in, and as he saw me processing what I had just witnessed, he said, with a calm expression, "We still have a lot to do, Hawthorne. This is just the beginning." With Drake's touch, the vision expanded, revealing a vast, illuminated sky. At first, I thought I was seeing a simple celestial scene, but I soon realized that what was unfolding before me was something beyond human comprehension. On the horizon, golden clouds moved in an orchestrated manner, as if obeying an invisible force. It was a spectacle that evoked reverence and awe. Then, an intense light enveloped the sky, and I saw angels appear, majestic and powerful, slowly descending. Each angel held a trumpet made of a shiny material that didn't look like gold, silver, or any metal that I knew. When the trumpets played, the sounds echoed like an ancient melody, a music that seemed to vibrate in the depths of my soul. It was as if those notes carried with them the weight of centuries and divine wisdom. I felt a deep peace and, at the same time, an inexplicable urgency, as if each sound carried an important message, destined to reach all humanity. Drake, next to me, watched silently. Without me needing to ask, he began to speak, his voice blending with the sound of the trumpets. "This is the 12th of November, Hawthorne," he said, with a serenity that contrasted with the intensity of the vision, "a moment that will mark a new phase for humanity. Angels will descend from the heavens, and many will feel their presence, but few will understand what it means. The urgency you feel now is the urgency the world will feel too. This event cannot be ignored." As he spoke, I glimpsed multitudes of people on Earth, all looking up to the sky with expressions of fear, amazement, and awe. It was as if, in every corner of the planet, people could hear the spiritual call that echoed from the presence of these divine beings. I realized that this vision was more than a revelation. It was an invitation for humanity to prepare, for each person to reevaluate their life, their choices, and their connection with the divine. The vision became more and more vivid, and my heart began to beat faster. I felt as if every cell of my being was being touched by that heavenly music, as if an ancient truth was being activated within me. I wanted to ask Drake what it all really meant, but he seemed to know my mind was full of questions. "Hawthorne," he said, "this is a call for all to awaken to the divine presence that has always existed, so that they understand that there is more beyond physical life, that eternity awaits us, and that each one must find their own path to enlightenment and connection with God. And you are a bearer of that message." The responsibility that these words carried hit me like an immense weight. I, a skeptical and pragmatic man, was being tasked with warning the world about something so unusual, so spiritual, that I didn't know if I would be able to find the right words to convey the importance of what I saw. But as I looked at the angels and felt the spiritual touch of the vision, I realized that it was my duty to share it, in some way, so that others could also feel the urgency and importance of this divine connection. Slowly, the vision began to dissolve, the trumpets fading until they became a distant echo, and the angels returning to heaven, leaving a trail of light. I felt my heart at peace, but also filled with the mission I had just received. As the last angel disappeared over the horizon, Drake turned to me and said, in his quiet, purposeful voice, "Hawthorne, this is just the beginning. Brace yourself, as there are more lessons to be learned." As the vision of angels and trumpets faded, I felt a change in the environment around me. The welcoming darkness that surrounded us now seemed to transform into a living canvas, where images began to form. Drake remained at my side, but now he looked at me with a serious face, as if he were about to reveal a painful and essential truth to me. "Now, Hawthorne," he said, "you will see your life in a way you have never seen before. This is the time to understand the impact of your actions, words, and thoughts. This is yours life review." Suddenly, scenes from my past began to emerge around us. There I was, a kid, running around the backyard of my parents' house in Savannah. I could hear the laughter, feel the pure, innocent joy that filled those days. The scene quickly changed, and now I was a teenager, fighting with my younger brother over something insignificant, but remembering the intense anger I felt at the time. I could hear my own harsh words echoing, and surprisingly, I also felt my brother's pain and sadness as he heard those words. It was as if, at that moment, I was inside him, experiencing the direct impact of my actions. "In every interaction, you leave a mark, Hawthorne," Drake explained. "A mark that reverberates through another and comes back to you." The review continued, taking me to moments that I had previously considered banal or forgotten, but which now became deeply significant. I saw scenes from my adult life, the careless conversations with friends, the times I was arrogant, judgmental, or indifferent to others' feelings. I felt every emotion I provoked, as if my spirit absorbed the impact of the actions I had generated in the world. This experience was both revealing and painful. At one point, a scene that I would rather forget appeared. It was the end of a relationship, where I had left a person I loved deeply without clear explanations, just out of an impulse of selfishness and pride. I could see the pain in her eyes, the confusion, and the feeling of abandonment. And once again, I felt like I was the one being abandoned. "Hawthorne," Drake's voice sounded gentle but firm. "With every action, you move further away from or closer to your divine purpose. Life is a classroom where the main lesson is the universal love. Love without expecting anything in return. Loving each being as part of a greater unity." I looked at him, deeply touched and questioning why so much pain was necessary for learning. But Drake explained to me that only by experiencing the consequences of our own actions can we understand the true nature of love and compassion. He told me about the authenticity, the importance of being truthful, of living in accordance with our deepest values, and the well-being of others. He explained that the connection with God does not require sacred places or complex rituals. It is something internal, present in every moment of our lives, if we only allow it to happen. Finally, he mentioned the importance of getting rid of prejudices and judgments, including those who make mistakes, as we are all on the same learning journey. "We are all parts of the divine body," he said, "and to hurt another is to hurt yourself." When the review ended, I felt profoundly transformed, as if each lesson had left a lasting mark on my soul. With a knowing look, Drake said, "Remember, Hawthorne, you have the power to change your destiny starting today. Let this life review be the first step towards becoming the most authentic and loving version of yourself." As the darkness dissolved again, I felt a profound relief, a renewal of spirit. I knew that, upon returning to Earth, I would have a new mission and a much clearer understanding of what really matters in life. With the life review complete, I felt an inner lightness, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from me. I realized that every moment, every decision in my life carried transformative power. Draken, with his penetrating gaze, noticed my change and smiled, pleased with the way I absorbed each lesson. "Now, Hawthorne, I want to show you something important," he said, as his expression became more solemn. "It may seem simple, but it is one of the most powerful secrets to shaping your life and your spirit." As he spoke, a new vision began to form around us. I saw myself lying in bed, just before falling asleep. It was an ordinary moment, an everyday scene, but Drake pointed to that moment with a meaningful look. "This is a moment of great power," he said. "Those minutes before going to sleep and right after waking up, these are the times when your mind and spirit are most open to the influences and intentions you place on yourself and the world around you." He called this moment "hour of power," explaining that it is in these brief moments, when we are on the verge of sleep and awakening, that the spirit is most receptive and that the intentions, thoughts, and emotions we cultivate have a profound and lasting effect on our lives. Drake emphasized the importance of using these moments to establish positive thoughts, visualizations, and prayers, as this is the most direct way to influence the reality we experience. "But what should I think, or feel, During the hour of power, I asked, intrigued by the concept. Drake responded calmly, as if revealing a sacred secret. You must cultivate thoughts of love, gratitude, and positive intention. Visualize the good you want for yourself and others. Imagine yourself in harmony with the universe, connected with God, and let these intentions sink deep into your consciousness. He explained that by practicing this daily, I would create a positive energy field around me, something that would help attract experiences and relationships that were in tune with these intentions. This practice, according to him, would be a shield against negativity and a guide for my spirit, helping me to live more consciously and connected with my true essence. As Drake spoke, I realized how carelessly the moments when I used to lie down or wake up had been treated throughout my life. I remembered how many times I fell asleep with thoughts of worry, resentment, or anxiety, and I understood how these feelings influenced my spirit and my reality in subtle but powerful ways. And when you wake up, I asked, is it also a moment of power? Drake nodded. Yes, when you wake up, you can set the tone for your day. Dedicate the first few minutes of your morning to be grateful for life, for the opportunity to learn, love, and be better. Visualize yourself navigating through the day with peace and purpose. This practice will restructure your spirit for the daily journey, guiding you to choices aligned with the greater good. This simple but profound idea had a profound impact on me. I had never considered the influence of my thoughts and emotions in these moments, and Drake's revelation filled me with hope. I saw there a concrete opportunity to change my life, to reconnect with what really mattered and live in harmony with the lessons he had taught me. When the vision of my hour of power faded, I turned my gaze to Drake, grateful and determined. He knew I was ready to live by this new understanding, and this was just another step on my journey of transformation. While still processing the depth of the hour of power and the new understanding Drake had given me, a sudden sense of movement enveloped me. It was as if the environment around me was adjusting, and I began to glimpse the scene in the restaurant where my limp body remained, surrounded by panicked staff and customers. Drake and I floated invisibly above the scene, observing everything with a calm that contrasted with the chaos and tension below. It was then that I noticed a young paramedic rushing into the bathroom. He carried with him an air of determination, although it was clear that he was nervous. His name was embroidered on his uniform. Nathaniel Clark. Drake, with a calm expression, watched me as I faced that moment in perplexity, trying to understand what would come next. Nathaniel knelt beside my body, placing resuscitation equipment around it. The faces around him showed disbelief, and one of the restaurant employees, with a worried look on his face, murmured, "I think it's gone. He's been like this for a long time." In fact, more than 40 minutes had passed since my heart stopped, and most people probably considered any attempt to save me futile. It was then that something incredible happened. In the midst of the confusion, Nathaniel seemed to hear something that no one else could. He stopped for a moment, closed his eyes as if concentrating on an inner voice, a kind of whisper inaudible to others. When he opened his eyes again, his expression was transformed, as if he had received a clear and unquestionable order. With a firm voice, he muttered to himself, "This one is not dead." And against all odds and opinions around him, he continued to try to resuscitate me, putting everything he had into every compression and every attempt to revive my body. Watching from above, I felt a mixture of gratitude and amazement at their perseverance and courage. Drake looked at me and, with a serene tone, explained, "Sometimes those who bring us back to life also receive instructions from the divine. Nathaniel is being guided. Even though he doesn't fully understand why, he feels the call to continue because it is part of his own soul's purpose." Drake's words resonated with me powerfully. That scene was much more than an attempt to save a life. It was a convergence of spiritual forces, a moment when the divine worked through human hands. Minute after minute, Nathaniel insisted, ignoring the disapproving and tired looks from his colleagues, who thought he was being reckless or foolish. But he seemed completely absorbed, with a determination that transcended logic. "I know you're still there," he whispered, as if speaking directly to me, never knowing that I was actually there, witnessing his struggle to bring me back. After another sequence of attempts, he paused, took a deep breath, and placed his hand on my chest. Closing his eyes once again, he made one last compression, filled with hope and faith. It was then that I felt an impulse, a type of energy that enveloped me, something that moved like a wave. A familiar sensation hit me, and I felt my spirit being pulled back, dragged towards the body below. In a matter of seconds, I felt the weight of matter again. It was suffocating and, at the same time, undeniably human. My heart beat again, slow but persistent, as if each beat was a victory in itself. Nathaniel opened his eyes, and upon noticing the return of his vital signs, his expression of relief and emotion was indescribable. As I watched this moment of miracle and transformation, Drake told me in a fatherly tone, "There are those who never abandon their faith, even when everything around them seems lost, and it is this kind of faith that can change the destiny of a soul." The gratitude I felt for Nathaniel, who had never given up on me, was immense. Somehow, that young paramedic had been the messenger of life, the divine instrument that had refused to give up. With the miracle accomplished, the scene dissolved around us, but the memory of their determination and faith would remain with me forever. Nathaniel didn't know it, but he had become part of my spiritual journey, and I knew that when I returned, I would carry his heroic action as a symbol of hope and persistence. After the surreal experience of returning to my body thanks to Nathaniel's perseverance, I began to feel a deeper and deeper connection to the lessons and moments I had shared with Drake. This mysterious figure, who had guided me on such a transformative journey, had left a lasting mark on my soul. When I finally returned to the world of the living and woke up in the hospital, I felt the need to understand who that spirit that had presented itself as my spiritual guide really was. During my recovery, a series of dreams about Drake began to recur. On lonely nights in the hospital, I saw him in places and times that seemed like something from another time, like visions from ancient history, where he wore clothes in a style reminiscent of the 18th century. He didn't speak, but every look and gesture in my dreams conveyed a feeling of closeness, as if he were at my side, offering his silent support and wisdom. Over time, the desire to know more about my ancestry and where Drake might have come from took over me. I always knew that my family had deep roots in Savannah and that our ancestors were important figures in the city's history. I decided to look through family records, looking for any connections that might reveal something about Drake. One day of research, I visited the local library and began digging through genealogical records and old family documents. It was then that I came across an intriguing mention of a man named Drake Ashford, a name that immediately resonated with me as a profound and unquestionable truth. He was a distant ancestor, a notable figure in the city during the 18th century. According to records, Drake was a respected and admired man, someone who acted as a mentor to those around him, known for his devotion to his family and his deep interest in spirituality. There were so many coincidences that my initial disbelief crumbled, giving way to silent certainty. The more I investigated, the more I felt that the spirit that had guided me was really my ancestor. He wasn't just a random spiritual figure. He was someone who shared a blood bond with me, a connection that transcended time. This explained the familiarity I felt from the first moment, the feeling that he knew me more deeply than I knew myself. My search revealed even more details about his life. I discovered that Drake was a man who had dedicated his life to studying the purpose of existence and seeking spiritual understanding. According to ancient accounts, he believed that we were all part of an eternal chain of souls, a spiritual lineage that passed from generation to generation, guiding and protecting those who came after. This ancestral belief seemed to be directly linked to the experience I lived. Upon returning home and fully recovering, I felt immense gratitude for everything he had taught me and for the spiritual connection that had proved to be an invaluable part of my identity. I was not only changed by an isolated experience, but also strengthened by this lineage connection. It was as if, by accepting Drake's presence in my life, I was accepting a greater purpose that I was destined to carry and fulfill. I understood that, as an heir to this ancestral wisdom, I had a mission: to live authentically and share the lessons I learned. Upon learning that Drake was my ancestor, I felt that the lessons about love, authenticity, and connection with God were not only universal teachings, but also a family legacy, something that should be passed on, keeping this eternal chain alive. Thus, Drake's presence was not just a temporary guide in a spiritual experience. It has become a part of me, a symbol of purpose, and a constant reminder that there is a greater journey to be lived and shared. When I finally left the hospital, the feeling of being back in the world of the living was strange and even uncomfortable. The first time I saw the sun shine through my bedroom window, I felt immense gratitude, but also an inexplicable nostalgia for that kingdom of light where everything radiated a divine serenity. I knew it would never be the same. Every fiber of my being had been touched, transformed by the experience, and although I was physically present, I felt that a part of me still bore the mark of heaven. Reality looked different now. Where before there was only the chaos of everyday life, I now saw a kind of secret harmony, an underlying order that connected everything and everyone. As I walked the streets of Savannah, I looked at each person as a soul on a journey, just like me. I understood that everyone carried their own pains, searches and challenges, and for the first time, I felt genuine and unconditional love for strangers. It was as if the vision of universal love that Drake had shown me was now deeply ingrained in me. I went back to the restaurant where everything happened and found Nathaniel Clark, the paramedic who had been the instrument of this miracle. When I told him about the voice that guided him to keep going, even after 45 minutes of cardiac arrest, he was silent, surprised. I wanted to express my gratitude, but words seemed insufficient. Instead, I offered a simple, "Thank you." He smiled and humbly replied, "I only did what I felt I needed to do. Sometimes we need to trust in something bigger than ourselves." Hearing these words, I understood that Nathaniel's intervention was part of a larger plan, a crucial piece in the lesson I needed to learn about faith and perseverance. It was as if he, like Drake, had been chosen to help me understand that the spiritual world and the physical world are interconnected in ways we don't realize. As the days went by, I felt a growing responsibility to share what I had learned. However, explaining what I experienced was not an easy task. Many people, including some close friends, looked at me skeptically, but I knew there was a reason for my experience, a purpose in every revelation I received, and I would not let the unbelief of others distract me from my mission. I decided to write and talk about the importance of living with authenticity, to understand that life is a classroom where we must learn to love and grow spiritually. I understood that our connection with God is personal and intimate, that each human being is part of a larger divine body, and that hurting another is, ultimately, hurting ourselves. I emphasized the importance of overcoming prejudices, embracing differences and living with unconditional love, as we are all on the same spiritual journey, even if on different paths. And most of all, I shared the message of the vision I had about the November 12th. I told him about the angels and the trumpets, about the spiritual calling I would feel that day, a milestone that, according to Drake, would bring a palpable divine presence to the world. I encouraged those listening to prepare themselves spiritually, to seek connection with God and to live more consciously. However, perhaps the most valuable lesson I learned was about self-nature of eternity. I understood that life is not limited to our time here on earth. It is a continuity, a chain that stretches through the ages, where every act of kindness, every positive thought, reverberates and accumulates, helping to create a more harmonious reality for us all. Even though the longing for the kingdom of light was intense, I now felt at peace, knowing that that place was not distant, but always accessible, in every act of love, in every sincere intention. My near-death experience was not the end. It was the beginning of a new life, a life of purpose and commitment to the greater good. Now, every day I live is an expression of gratitude. I look at the world with new eyes, aware that, just as I was touched by the divine, everyone has the chance to connect to that light. And that's what I want to pass on, the certainty that we are not alone, that we are part of something infinitely bigger, and that, by choosing love, we walk together towards a luminous eternity full of purpose. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.